So the big story, as far as I'm concerned, that we can cover here on Leaf Talk is the fact that the Maple Leafs and the Ottawa Senators are being watched very carefully. Not during the game, because we do that. We, the fans, we do that. The league now is starting to watch what's going on before the game starts. So we're getting some funny business happening. The league doesn't have to stop there. They can start looking at what's going on after the whistle, the kind of stuff that's going on, and the conversations getting around to. So is it possible that, people are doing things to intimidate? A puck was shot at Anthony Stolarz by his former teammate. And so now a guy that knows a lot about the NHL is suggesting the league's looking at it, Aaron.
Well, for those who don't know, Nick Cousins played for the Florida Panthers and was the individual who cold-cocked Brad Marchand and put him out with a concussion last year on Florida's way to the Cup. The NHL didn't take any action at that point. Cousins was traded to the Ottawa Senators. This was to make way for Brad Marchand coming to the Florida Panthers. It seems like a rather obvious move to offload Cousins, especially if you're bringing in the guy that he sucker punched during the playoffs last year. Now, before the game last night, Game 3, Cousins did shoot a puck at Stolarz while he was warming up by the blue line. The NHL is currently investigating that. They're also clamping down on a weird Scheifele and Nick Hofer standoff in the Blues-Jets series. Now, Stolarz apparently was not in the good books of the Ottawa Senators after slashing Ridley Greig a few times. Now, this was in response to Ridley Greig running Stolarz in Game 1. And jokingly, Stolarz said he made a pregame deal with the officiating crew before Game 3 saying, hey, you guys watch my back and I'll behave. So a little bit of chicanery, a little bit of one-upsmanship, a little bit of gamesmanship going on here with Cousins, who is an acknowledged pot stirrer, shall we say, polite way to put it, when it comes to this sort of thing. But yeah, Friedman says that the NHL is looking at a couple of different instances where noted friend of Kevin Bieksa, Nick Cousins, shot a puck at Anthony Stolarz, as well as the Scheifele Hofer standoff in the Blues and Jets series. So there's a little more scrutiny here than perhaps players might want or deem valid and necessary, but it is all their own making.
It is a wonderful thing to have the ability to play for a trophy that as a kid you play and raise your arms in the air, scoring the overtime goal that wins the Stanley Cup. The honor and respect that talks about, unfortunately, sometimes on the road to that end, people will do anything to win. And there's a saying that I haven't heard it too much so far this year, but I've heard it before. If you're not cheating, you're not trying. So the question is, what amount of cheating, what amount of misbehavior, unsportsmanlike conduct, which the National Hockey League referred to in regards to what they're dealing with here and what they want to deal with and what they want to ensure, is that sportsmanship is still a part of the game, and being unsportsmanlike should not be. And there's a reason for that. And I don't want to sound like a lefty liberal, suffering from a severe wokeism. But, there is something to be said for teaching children who are watching these games, not giving them the impression that, you know what, you have to stay within the rules. It's something you should do. It's the right thing to do. And there was a little bit of tongue in cheek in there, Aaron. I saw you give me that look. I don't care how people take it. I said what I said, and I do believe that it's important that the Leafs maintain their composure and not get affected by the after the whistle stuff. And it's important because if they concentrate on what it takes to win, let Ottawa concentrate on what it takes to lose.
And really, I mean, that's honestly, I am a very diehard Leafs fan. I will back that team to the hilt. But I don't have a problem with calling out poor behaviors, shall we say. So, if you're not behaving right and you're not following the rules, I'm more than happy to call you out on it. This behavior that we're seeing after the whistle is not anything that needs to continue.
No.
The whole saw in hockey is you play to the whistle. This stuff that's happening after, people might call it gamesmanship, but no, you're just being a jerk at that point, really. And nobody wants or needs that.
Well, then there I have to disagree with you. I'm not sure nobody wants it here. And I think some of the people, listen, part of the distress that Ottawa's going through now is the reality of being ousted out of the playoffs, possibly in 4 straight. Losing a series is one thing, right? Losing in 7 has its own pain, right? It has its own pain. Losing in 4 has its own pain too. Can you recover from, losing in 7? It breaks your heart to lose in that manner, but your spirit's more in danger if you lose 4 straight. So game number 4 in Ottawa is going to be the kind of game dependent on the conversations that will be had with the league and the players, because we have been told already there have been conversations, not necessarily suspensions. There have been conversations with coaches. There have been conversations with players advising them that the road they're on could lead to some pretty big problems. So we would suggest that you not continue. So I would think that if that's in the toolbox for the National Hockey League, there are going to be conversations. And I'm not saying that they'll be directed strictly to Ottawa. I think they'll be directed and to both teams, because we know that when things get out of hand in this regard, it's an embarrassment for the league.
Yeah, and Ottawa has a chance here, based on Toronto's playoff history, to do something really funny. Now, it's only happened 4 times in NHL history. We're talking the 1942 Stanley Cup Finals, where Toronto came back to beat the Detroit Red Wings. This is the only time that it's happened in the Stanley Cup Finals. There is New York coming back over Pittsburgh in 1975 in the Stanley Cup quarterfinals. There's the Philadelphia Flyers coming back against the Boston Bruins in the 2010 Eastern Conference Finals, where coincidentally Philly also overcame a 3-0 goal deficit in the 7th game. And finally, the Los Angeles Kings and San Jose Sharks, where Los Angeles won 3 Game 7s in that playoff year and came back against the Sharks as well. And that was in the 2014 Western Conference first round. So Ottawa has an opportunity here based on Toronto's playoff experience and the first round curse to do something really funny. But at the same time, Toronto now has 4 opportunities to put it away, which I hope they don't waste.
That's something that they need to really concentrate on. Now, that's the big story because it sets the table for what will happen in Game 4. But the real setting for Game 4, the one that means that Toronto could eliminate Ottawa, lies at the feet of their number 6 defenseman. And let me repeat that, because I don't want this to sound like I'm just saying something for the heck of saying it. Their number 6 defenseman. How many defensemen are they playing, Aaron?
6.
So he's
that guy.
He's not the guy that the team turns and depends on. But yet, the 2 games that finished in overtime, he had a big part in both goals. I don't think there was a bigger part for an assist, for a player in overtime than the one that he displayed. What he did was amazing. Now, I've talked about this, and I think I talked to you about it as well, that to me, it's not surprising that he does this kind of stuff. I just think it's surprising that with consistency, he's being successful at it, because we've seen Benoit skate down the ice with the puck often. Often. It's something that he likes doing. And maybe that investment of him doing it all year is finally starting to pay off in spades.
It's possible that people just don't remember the last time he did it, but he's jumped in from the point before and handled the puck down low along the boards,
Anytime.
and the previous game 2, when he fed Max Domi and then blotted out the sun to get the screen for the game winning goal in overtime is indicative of what he's capable of. There is offensive flair there. And for him to score directly off the faceoff as he did in the overtime period, 30 odd seconds in, that's, this is the second time he's played overtime hero. I'm just hoping that the Leafs aren't going to come to rely on that sort of thing.
I don't think so. I don't think so. Aaron, I have a theory. And I love having theories. I love thinking about stuff. And I'm thinking to myself, looking at the way the games are being played, the way players are, a player like Benoit. The reason why players who don't really have the history or people's perceived vision of their talent in the playoffs is flummoxed, is thrown away, is because the tight checking in the playoffs, as tight as it ever will be in a game, right, will be in the playoffs. Which means, for example, we have the top 6 forwards in Toronto who are well known for puck possession, who are well known for containing a team in their own zone and cycling the puck. If a defenseman and a player that's not that well known is on the ice with them, there's, I believe, an automatic opportunity for them to do well, because the team you're playing against is distracted by the great players that you have, leaving a void for you to fill. And that's what it looks like to me. That's what Benoit's done. There's been a the Maple Leafs have been defensively hounded beautifully by Ottawa, but at the same time, in doing so, they're leaving themselves open to somebody else who might be able to do something really good. So we've seen Domi score the goal. We've seen, of course, now Benoit score the goal. We've seen a lot of great opportunities for the third line, the third and fourth line. And it all comes down to that. And that is that how you play is up to you. It's an opportunity. That's why greatness is, not thrust upon people. It's basically them taking advantage of an opportunity. And Benoit's done a masterful job of doing that. Are there any other players on the Leaf backline defense? Well, we know that Morgan Riley's a really good defenseman, and he's on a pretty good heater when it comes to playoff points. So, this is the strength of the Leafs in the playoffs is the weakness. Up until the end of the year, the Leaf defense wasn't contributing anything. Now look.
Strange times make for unlikely heroes. Not Jake McCabe. Chris Tanev has been the one that's been stopping the most pucks and putting his body on the line. Morgan Riley has his points. Brandon Carlo is showing that he is everything that was advertised when we picked him up. Simone Benoit has shown a surprising offensive spark. Not upset by that at all. OEL has been somewhat more limited in his role.
But what he's done, and what the Leafs are fortunate about is that his long reach comes in very handy. His reach in this series has been very important to the Leafs. There have been really good opportunities snuffed just by a simple poke of the puck.
Yeah, and the fact that we're hardly talking about him at all is what I think is the most heartening for me. With Pacioretty drawing in as well, that unfortunately sidelines Nicky Bobby, who is going to be in need of a new contract soon, and would like probably to have more of an opportunity to show what he can do to Leafs brass. But at this point in time, really, what you need as a player individually is definitely subservient to what the team needs. So At this point, if Pacioretty suits the team's needs better, then unfortunately, so other players are going to be left sitting. So.
Let's also, I think it's not because of Pacioretty's age. It's not because of his conditioning, but there is a thing called team game shape, right? On a team, there's game shape, and he seemed to suffer a little bit of running out of the old gas towards the end of the game. He wasn't as he didn't have the same kind of energy level. Now the question is, does the coach say, okay, he's got to get into game shape, I'll put him in again, or does he turn around and say, okay, your buddy Nicky Robbie sat out and he's had a chance to re-energize. Does he toss them in? Is this the kind of game, this game 4 that we're looking forward to, Aaron? Is it the kind of game that's going to require a Leaf that can score or a Leaf that can hit? That's the decision that's got to be made by the coaching staff.
And really, the Leafs have kind of put themselves in a bit of a tough position here, because while Austin certainly managed to bust his donut, his goal-scoring donut, the question really is now, what direction do the Leafs want to go in?
How are they going to win Game 4? Because Game 4 has a whole set of emotional triggers, and the way Game 4 is going to be played is going to be something that is going to be something to behold, Aaron. It's a game that this kind of Game 4 situation, my recollection looking back, this could be a 7-1 game, or it could be a 1-0 game in overtime. It's the extremes are available here in this game. So how does a coaching staff, how does a team ensure that those the unexpected things that could happen? What's the best lineup to deal with that? That's the question that's going to have to be answered. And desperation is, these are desperate times I think they're desperate times for both Ottawa and Toronto. Toronto, because of their history, does not want to lose this game. They're at the point now where we don't want to lose this game. So they're going to do their damnedest. Now they'll probably play the best four in this situation than they have played in a long time, because that's who this team is.
And that's the thing, when you talk about this game and you say, well, it could be 7-1 or it could be 1-0. It could be for either team.
Right.
We're not saying that Toronto's going to win this 7-0 or 7-1 or even 1-0. It could just as easily be Ottawa pulling the rug out from underneath the Maple Leafs and spoiling the sweep.
There's so much at stake that momentum in a game like this is, it's going to be hard fought. There's going to be a big fight for momentum. So I guess it's safe to say that the Leafs, in a way, are going to try and maintain the status quo.
They're really going to have to try to, and that, based on the lineups that we've seen this morning and what we've seen them run out for practice, it really does look like they're trying to maintain that. Pacioretty is still going to be drawing in on the left wing with Domi and McMahon. Lorentz, Lawton, and Yarncrook are still going to be the fourth line. Holmberg, Tavares, and Nylander on the second line, and Knies, Matthews, and Marner on the first. Speaking of, Mitch Marner's touch pass to Austin Matthews for the second goal was a thing of beauty. I don't recall ever seeing anything quite that slick, and I've been watching hockey for a while now. Marner, early series Marner seems to be on fire. Matthews is finally off the schneid. This has the potential to either go really, really right or really, really wrong for the Leafs, and we're not going to know until the final whistle goes. And that's I think, what I love. Yeah, absolutely love that.
It's just hockey. That's what hockey is. Hockey, and what games are. Games are not about predictability, especially the ones we like. The games we like, the games we love. It's the lack of predictability that makes games so incredible. White knuckling it through a game is something that fans, while they're experiencing it, which I'm one and have had experience like that, like with the All-Star break. It was the tenseness. It was incredible, but it's what makes sports so wonderful: the lack of predictability and the surprise when things happen. Like when Canada wins the gold medal. Or sorry, they win the championship, the trophy. So it's all great. We're looking forward to a really good finish to the Leaf series, and that'll be happening on Hockey Night in Canada on Saturday, a regular Saturday game. Let's talk a little bit about the Habs. And you have here that Matheson's telling people, oh boy, those fans in Montreal, they're going to be on fire.
Yeah, so that, I mean, that's really the hope at this point because of the position that they're currently in their series against Washington. They need the seventh man more than anything. Now, Mike Matheson knows firsthand what playoff hockey in Montreal feels like, but even he can't quite imagine how Electric Bell Center's atmosphere is going to be tonight. This is going to be their first home playoff game before a full crowd since 2017. This is, after going through a global pandemic and a rebuild, you know, now they're behind 2-0, which is not a place that any team ever wants to be in. But the hope is here that with the help of the crowd, they'll be able to get right back into it. They have been close. They've managed to be fairly close with Washington this entire series so far. It's just a question of what they need to get over the top, and even I'm not 100% sure exactly what it is that they're going to need.
The predictability of things sometimes, is scary. And when the predictability of a situation develops in this atmosphere, playoff hockey, right? When all the marbles are there for the taking, it surprises me. Maybe it shouldn't, that the Montreal Canadiens are having problems with Patrik Laine.
Yeah, no. I watching him play, you've got to kind of wonder if he does really care or if he might actually be better off back in Europe. There seems to be a certain amount of disengagement with Laine, and he was supposed to be their big get, coming into this.
Even when they got him, a lot of people said, careful what you wish for.
Yeah. And
go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say that seemed to be the problem when he was in Winnipeg. He got to a certain point and he just turned off. And then he got to Columbus and he got to a certain point and he just turned off. So I'm surprised that he's already reached that point with Montreal.
At this time, I'm just, at this moment in time to have this happen is I guess what we have to understand is that and we've heard of players in Montreal. There was a player that stopped playing. He got traded out of Montreal and he found his way. It's an emotional experience. These are human beings, and the stresses of being a hockey player. Hey, look, most of us look at being a hockey player as a privilege, an opportunity to basically enjoy life, being a hockey player, being in the National Hockey League, being someone who's got a chance to win a Stanley Cup, that which we from our youth, dream of, think of. We forget the kind of stresses that a person feels under those circumstances. And there's a laundry list of ways to deal with it, just as there is maybe a short list of how not to deal with it. And I'm beginning to think that Patrik Laine just doesn't seem to be built to be a hockey player under these circumstances, because he appears to be opting out, and opting out for me, when it's clear as it is, there's an underlying issue. And I don't know what it is. We saw the same thing in Vancouver this year. Their best player, same thing. I hope whatever it is that's bothering him, he's in a good place. Montreal's a very intelligent, organization. I'm sure they'll figure out something. At least that's my hope, because it's too bad. That guy can be the difference maker, with this series. His success is the same as that of Ovi from that position. He shoots from that same location and has the shot to do it. And to not see him have an opportunity to be successful, it's kind of sad. You know what I mean?
Oh, for sure. And it's puzzling, because all of the tools are there. all of the motivation he could conceivably want, from my perspective at least, is there. There's the fan base, there's the money, there's the adulation, there's a chance to play in the true heart of hockey in North America. All of that is right there and available to him. The fact that he can't get himself motivated enough for games, or doesn't appear to be able to get himself motivated enough for games, is definitely troubling.
What else is troubling is it's unbelievable how politics, this year, I mean, who am I to suggest that politics doesn't belong in sports or in the National Hockey or in hockey? We've seen how it's become an integral part of the NHL right now, with some of the issues, of course, with the booing of the national anthems. One also has to wonder about what's out there right now, and that is there's some concern from Quebec ministry that there is a language issue developing. Now it's been patted down and put to bed, to at least for now, that the phrase "Go Habs Go" is being called into question.
So the Office québécois de la langue française, or OQLF, acted on complaints that it received about Société de Transport de Montréal and Société de Transport de Laval about buses that were displaying "Go Canadien Go" and "Go Rocket Go." They had indicated that they had received complaints about that. In addition, they'd also received complaints about "Go Club Football de Montréal Go" in support of Montreal's professional men's soccer team. The OQLF did say it had approached the Société de Transport de Montréal and suggested they change the language. The issue that they're coming against here is it's taking a while to change it, because it all has to be done manually to change it from "Go Canadiens Go" to "Allez Canadiens Allez." Now, the Sovereigntist Parti Québécois, Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon, says, you know what, I'm as Quebecois as they come. I am a Quebec sovereigntist. Even I'm going to say "Go Habs Go," because that's become part of Quebec culture. The anglicization and adoption of certain English words into the French language, like "stapon de crime" and sort of stuff like that. They're like, it's now part of our history. "Allez Canadiens Allez" is fine, but "Go Habs Go" is just fine too. So
as long as they don't say "Go Habs Go," it's "Go Habs Go."
Exact. So basically, they're saying the ministry is saying, look, we get it, but Jean-François Robert has said that OQLF employees actually had been receiving threats of physical violence over the fact that they were making buses change from "Go Habs Go" to "Allez Canadiens Allez," and they said, look, that behavior is completely unacceptable, but we are going to wash our hands of it. Any more complaints that we hear about "Go blank Go," we're going to be ignoring, because you people are being just too ridiculous.
And it is just a normal, easy, very simple way to say "Go Habs Go" is very simple and easy to understand and easy to say. But that doesn't mean that in Montreal you hear them going "Allez, allez." They have that too. It's not like they're trading, French for English. They're just accommodating English and accommodating something that every team says: "Go Leafs Go."
Exactly.
It's all the same kettle of fish, and this is something that is a tempest in a teapot, until the concerns that you're referring to that they're having with these physical threats. That's just ridiculous. It's hopefully cooler heads will prevail and people will enjoy the game. And I think it'll help a lot if Montreal can win the game, because I do find that some of these issues are amplified by dissatisfaction with the way the games are going. The same is true everywhere. Look at being an Edmonton fan. How hard is it to be an Edmonton fan right now? You went from a season that your team made it to Game 7 in the Stanley Cup final, and now they've gone and lost 2 games in a row. Give me a break. I mean, give me a break. Edmonton's got some tough things to overcome. Their team is not intact. they're entering into a war of attrition with a few weapons missing, before the thing even starts, and they're suffering. They have losses that they've already lost, but I think Edmonton can do well at home. I believe in Draisaitl and McJesus. It's just it's too bad, because the Edmonton fan base. I don't like disappointment for Canadian teams. I think my feelings about that. I want to see every Canadian team succeed, and I would have loved to have seen Edmonton up against Winnipeg in the next round.
Well, the Edmonton Oilers actually tried a rather unique strategy in Game 2 against the Kings, with their top 4 lines and top 2 defensive pairings. Essentially, they were uniting groups of players who had rarely, if ever, played together in the 24-25 regular season. Now, they lost the game, but it might be going a little too far to say that the strategy was entirely a disaster. The real issue is on special teams. Los Angeles had 8 power play grade A shots and 3 goals, and the Oilers had just 2 grade A shots and no goals. However, even in 5-on-5 play, the Oilers didn't quite look like they had it all together. Corey Perry with Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl was interesting. Those 2 stars have played 471 regular season even strength minutes together. They put Evander Kane on the line with Ryan Nugent-Hopkins and Zach Hyman, who they've spent 519 even strength minutes together this season, most often with McDavid as their center. So you're looking at usually McDavid, Nugent-Hopkins, and Hyman. With the third line, they put Trent Frederick with Adam Henrique and Connor Brown, who've only played about 390 to 400 minutes together this season. And then Matthias Janmark was on a line with Vasily Podkolzin and Victor Arvidsson. They're the line that's actually spent, I think, the most time together so far this season. But it's not like it didn't 100% work, but it wasn't 100% a failure either. It's one of those, you got kind of middling results, which muddies the water even further,
Well, they're a great team. They're handicapped right now, but they're going home, Aaron. They're going to be at home. They're going to get the last change. They're going to get their crowd behind them, just like Montreal is going to get their crowd behind them. Winnipeg has to recover from a pretty embarrassing loss. That game, boy, oh boy, is it physical.
Yeah, this is actually really a game of baggage smashers. It wasn't what I was expecting in the slightest.
Oh, I was. St. Louis. St. Louis. They're gonna bring everything. And the thing of it is that I don't know how, Florida did it. They went through the whole playoffs playing that kind of game, and they survived. And they I think they went with the same defenseman all the way through. So it's possible you can play that kind of rambunctious game and be successful. I just don't think, logically speaking, that expending energy like that, trying to hit people, doesn't do any wear and tear. We talk about the attrition fact in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and nothing. It's a war of attrition, I'm telling you. That St. Louis Winnipeg game. Hopefully Winnipeg can bounce back and get to 3-1. I really want to see them go through. I'm really happy for the Winnipeg fans who know they've got a really good team. I hope they're not disappointed, but folks, this is what it's all about. You take a 2-0 lead, it becomes 2-1 real quick. Even the 3-0 lead, which the Leafs have, becomes a 3-1 lead. So it's not, you can fight your way back. So hopefully Winnipeg will work things out.
Well, Benner did actually play rather well. Had himself 17 saves on 19 shots. Buchnevich had 3 goals for his first career playoff hat trick and an assist. Cam Fowler, on the other end, had a goal and 4 assists to set a Blues franchise records for points by a defenseman in a playoff game. Turapchenko, Parayko, and Kyrou also scored. Not saying that Winnipeg is necessarily on thin ice, but certainly now with only a 2-1 lead instead of potentially a 3-0 lead, it certainly makes things a little more interesting. Game 4 is going to be Sunday. Game 5 is going to be in Winnipeg on Wednesday. Interesting to note here that Buchnevich, who had 1 goal in 22 previous postseason games, gave the Blues an early lead with 2 goals in the game's opening minutes. He got it going just 48 seconds in by kicking the puck off his stick and into the net, and then he tipped Thomas's shot for a power play goal at 3:11. So definitely contributions from guys who hadn't ordinarily contributed before. It was a big theme for St. Louis. We'll have to see if they are able to continue that, or if Winnipeg can shut them down.
Absolutely. Well, there's a lot of teams now. This is, once you get around to game 3 and 4, that's when the series starts to get to the point where a victor has the opportunity, right? So there's an opportunity here for players to start doing what it takes to finish off an opponent. And you and I both know that it's not automatic.
No, and that's, I think, what makes watching these games, especially at this time of year, so much fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about some other sports. Let's go over to the Blue Jays, who lost their 5th straight. It's something that I guess, we were hoping that they do better than that. They made a big signing.
Yeah, we were kind of hoping that things would start better than they have. The unfortunate thing here is this 5-game losing streak tends to eat at your confidence, especially this early in the season. And for a group that is potentially as fragile as they are, even though they've got Vladdy locked up, even though they brought in a new big signing, Bo Bichette still needs to be signed.
He's not well at all.
No, he's not having a good time of it, really. This is potentially a make or break moment for the Jays. If they can get through their next homestand all right, they should be okay. But at this point, whether they will or not, or even if they'll go 500, is anybody's guess.
Yeah, they like the Leafs had a core of players that both teams felt that these were players they could ride into, into the promised land, right? It hasn't worked out that way. It's something that, in the case of Toronto, the Leafs, in case of Toronto's Leaf team, management did not look very good before this year, because we all were convinced that they had the talent and they weren't accomplishing anything resembling talent, right? So now all of a sudden, right, we've got the Blue Jays, the same thing. They've got this talent and they have done very little with it. And it's been a long time since the Jays have accomplished something positive. That playoff game they lost, they shouldn't have lost. That management, the way they operate, the team caused the loss, in my opinion. And I think this is the last year for this tandem of president and general manager for this team. I wouldn't even put any of this blame on their coach, on their manager. He's done a pretty good job, but unfortunately, this organization will be forced to flush these guys if this team doesn't do something seriously accomplished this year.
My only fear in all of this is that the individuals who should have been fired and should have been let go by the organization will fail upwards. And that, is truly
Don't scare me like that. Don't scare me like that. That's the Peter principle. Anybody who doesn't know what the Peter principle is, it's what Aaron just said. People get promoted until they fail, and then they find themselves in a position they can't do.
Well, and I think a lot of times they'll move people into these higher positions because they don't want to fire them, but at the same time, those positions that they're put into give them less responsibility, so there's less for them to screw up.
Yeah, and Edward Rogers has been under the gun. He's had difficulties with his sister. There have been debates. There have been situations where his running of the team has been brought into play, right? It's been brought into play. And when ownership gets in or weighs in on what's going on a team, the deeper they get involved, the more problems exist, and things don't get better when ownership gets involved. We've seen it with the Dallas Cowboys. We've
Buffalo
seen
Sabres.
it. Yeah, we've seen it, and it's a common error on the part of ownership. But because they're committing the error, it's not that noticeable.
Yeah, and the problem is when you get into a situation like that and it does continue and it's not nipped in the bud like it needs to be, that can carry on and affect teams for decades. And I hate to beat an old horse, but you get something that happens like the Ballard era, and it's very, very hard for teams to recover from something like that.
And they're not. The other thing, Aaron, is that you're not going to get help from other teams.
No.
In that instance. The Montreal Canadiens ownership, the Molsons, threw a $5 million anchor at Ballard and said, "We'll save you." And it didn't quite happen as saving. It ended up being Molson did it for the benefit of the Montreal Canadiens. And anybody who thinks that the Montreal Canadiens were going to help the Leafs in any way, the fact that they were willing to help them at that time tells you that wasn't a good move. Let's talk about the Canucks and the negativity emanating from that organization doesn't end. And now we have a story, Aaron, that you have on their practice facility or their absence of a practice facility. Is that?
Yeah. The PWHL is going to be coming into Vancouver next season. They didn't have any problems whatsoever finding a practice rink. However, the Vancouver Canucks, for some strange reason, 15 years after saying that they were going to get a practice rink, still don't have one. One of the recruiting items that was originally presented to Chris Tanev when the Canucks were looking to sign him in the summer of 2010 was a plan to have a team-built and team-controlled practice facility in place in the then near future. Tanev is now 5 years past his decade as a Canuck, with 4 years left on a contract with the Toronto Maple Leafs that's going to expire when he's 40. The joke now is that the Canucks will open a practice facility the same year that Tanev retires. They need a 20,000 square foot area that they can build on, but they've had talks with 3 or 4 different facilities, and for some reason it just hasn't worked out. I'm puzzled as to how the Aquilinis have not been able to find themselves a practice rink or even build one in the amount of time that they've been talking about it. It's absolutely mystifying to me how an organization with that much money and that much pull, especially in the greater metro area of Vancouver, hasn't been able to find a place just to practice.
If there's anything that an organization can offer in sports because of the cap effect, you can't do it with players. You can do it with coaches, and you can do it with training facilities. If either of those are less than the best, then you're not doing your job, and you're creating a handicap for a team. So we're not suggesting, I don't think we're suggesting that this is the reason why, they have personal issues going on with the Vancouver Canucks, but, it can actually exacerbate that kind of thing because, I believe players need routine, and they need to know where they can do what they need to do and be able to do it on a consistent basis. And I just don't think not having a practice facility is conducive to that. So there's a bit of a disadvantage, that a team has because they don't have their own practice facility. And we talked about the Blue Jays, their practice facility is incredible. Why did the Blue Jays do that? Did they need to spend $100 million? I don't think so. I think they did it because to stay competitive. And the Canucks have to do that basic thing. If they don't have a practice facility, they've got to rectify that right away. And you know what? It's not just about that. What does it look like? You're a professional organization and you don't have a consistent place to practice at. It sends a terrible message everywhere.
I mean, the PWHL has stepped in, and they've already got Pacific Coliseum at Hastings Park wrapped up, which to me is awesome. That was the home of the Canucks for their inaugural season back in 1970 until they moved to what is currently known as Rogers Arena, then known as GM Place in 1995. The Coliseum is obviously going to undergo comprehensive upgrades, including improving player facilities and the viewing experience. A new center ice video board is planned, and the broadcast capabilities of the arena are going to be funded by the PNE and the City of Vancouver. The city's also going to upgrade the Agrodome next door to function as a team's dedicated practice facility. So, how the PWHL manages to step in and get all of this done in months, and the Vancouver Canucks have not, is just mind-boggling.
Their Vancouver team is not connected to the Canucks, right? It's a separate entity, like the Leafs aren't part of the Toronto team in the PWHL.
No, so the PWHL is entirely a sole owner group. They are not individually owned. They're all controlled by the same entity in the PWHL.
Oh, okay. I thought the Bruins had some. There were some NHL teams that were supportive of the PWHL.
Well, they were definitely supportive of, but not owned by.
Oh, okay.
At least that's my understanding.
Thank you. No, thank you for clarifying that. Yeah, thank you so much for saying that and doing that. I guess if we don't talk about F1, Aaron's probably going to deflate. So go ahead, Aaron. I know you want to talk about F1.
Well, for those of you North American gearheads, General Motors has plans to supply engines for the new Cadillac team starting in 2029. So the FIA approved this on Wednesday after GM's Cadillac brand got the final sign-off to join the F1 grid next year as the 11th Formula One team, which means there's going to be 21 to 22 teams on the grid. The Cadillac team is going to start using Ferrari engines until a GM Performance Power Unit, formed by GM and its co-owner of the team's TWG Motorsports, is ready to start supplying engines in 2029. Now, this comes amid discussion in F1 over whether to change course on the sport's commitment to the current turbocharged hybrid power units ahead of regulation changes coming for 2026, or go back to ye old screaming V10 engines. So this puts their participation in the direction that they need to go in under a certain amount of pressure, at least until the end of next season. So FIA President Mohammed Ben Sulayem has suggested a return to V10 engines last used in 2005, but we'll see where it goes after the 2026 regulation changes.
One of the biggest concerns, and I'm not a big fan of talking about this, but I also can't not talk about it and can't ignore it. Tell us about the court case with the five at the time were junior players, and all of them are professional hockey players now. A few of them were in the NHL and had to leave. And now this trial is going, and now they're calling for a mistrial reasons. Understand?
So there is unfortunately a publication ban, which means that information about what actually happened is harder to come by than it normally would be. There was a mistrial declared by Maria Caroccia. Now, this is 3 days after they fully constituted a 14-member jury. That happened yesterday. Jury selection was ongoing as of today, with a new trial to start on the Monday. So they are still proceeding. There is still going to be a trial. However, that particular iteration, they had to let the jury go. The judge thanked them for their time, but because there was a mistrial, and there is no reason actually being given for that, but mistrials are usually done when lawyers and judges believe it's not possible for a fair result to be reached at. They've found that there could potentially be some bias one way or the other with the jury that has been selected. So they've had to reselect and try to figure out exactly what went wrong the first time around, so that Michael McLeod, Dylan Dubé, Cal Foote, Carter Hart, and Alex Fermenton, who have all pleaded not guilty, can be tried in the fairest way possible.
Yeah, and we don't have any idea at all. There are plenty of reasons, and it's a situation that needs to be dealt with. It's a situation that needs to have a conclusion drawn, one that is based on justice being blind. It has to happen, and the mere mention of this case, Aaron. Not that I'm looking for to say, oh, here's something good about it. I don't mean it exactly like that, but the one good thing about the case, which is important, and that is that publicly understanding that something like this, that we understand only very little about, that happened, right, needs serious consideration, and justice needs to protect all of us. And sometimes victims need an opportunity to be protected. That doesn't mean that as victims, the other folks are perpetrators. That's the whole point of the trial. And that could be one of the reasons why it's a mistrial. But there are tons of reasons why it could be a mistrial. But mostly the reason it's a mistrial is because a fair trial doesn't look like it's in the offing. And that's the ripcord they pull. So it's an interesting situation. It's a very tough and emotional situation. This isn't going to be easy, Aaron. Just the same thing. If I can switch it a little bit, you comment on that last comment. Then the same thing's true with Bernardo. The guy was a terrible human being. Is probably still a terrible human being. I don't know him. I don't know the situation. And there's a lot of upsettedness because they're taking him from maximum security and putting him into medium security. And the thought of doing that, regardless of the reasoning, causes a reaction, right? So, the justice system is prone to be second guessed. It has to be anyway. That's what the justice system should leave itself open to. And that is, new information, facts that change the narrative. They have to be open to that stuff. So with these hockey players, it's going to be interesting, how this pans out. I'm not a big fan of news bans. I'm not a fan of it, Aaron. I can understand why they do it. I'm not saying it's wrong, but like I said, the benefit of a trial like this happening sends a clear message to people, and this clear message is as clear as mud.
Yeah, the unfortunate issue that we have here is it, of course, brings out the worst in people who are quick to say, oh, they're declaring a mistrial because the accuser lied. That's the most frequent thing that I've seen floating around.
That's what the publication ban allows to happen.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate part. But at the same time, exposing the reasons for why there was a mistrial also further muddies the water. And you'd be hard pressed to find people who are not biased one way or the other when it comes to something like this. And that is
the concern, though, Aaron, is the system biased? Yeah. And does the publication ban hide the fact that it's being biased? It's a possibility. But again, that's why I'm not a big fan of publication bans, because publication bans mean no information. And what's left after no information? Only speculation.
And speculation can, at best, be misinformation, at worst, disinformation. So, we are really left in limbo in this particular situation, but hopefully more light will be shed on this in the days to come.
The best resolution that needs to be understood with this case, the only thing I'll say is this. The one thing for sure that I can say, regardless of their innocence or guilt, regardless of the truth or non-truth that's being, the accusation is, the important issue is that we're highlighting the fact that people deserve to be treated with respect. And that's what we should take from this case first and foremost. And that's what I try to do. And that's what I'm thinking about, as opposed to concentrating on the publication ban and or the accusations that are out there that we think are out there, right?
Mm-hmm. No, for sure. Not only must justice be done, it must be seen to be done. That's the hard part.
Absolutely. More concerning news, measles cases in Ontario are rising. Tell me about thousands are out there now.
There are now more than 1,000 Ontario residents, mostly children, who've been infected with measles in what is the largest outbreak in the province has experienced in decades. In its weekly update on measles, Public Health Ontario reported that the outbreak case count grew by 95 cases over the past week alone, bringing the total since it began to 1,020 cases. Now, although the numbers are continuing to rise, the rate of spread has slowed in recent weeks, suggesting that the outbreak is beginning to lose steam. But the outbreak has been fueled by lack of immunization amongst the vast majority of those affected. About three-quarters of cases have been in infants, children, and adolescents, with the remainder in adults. More than 95% of infected infants, children, and adolescents were unimmunized. A total of 76 people have required hospitalization. The outbreak is actually linked with a Mennonite gathering in New Brunswick last fall. So we're looking at cases that have been reported in 15, that's 15 different health units across the province, but the highest concentration of cases has been in southwestern Ontario. Now, Ottawa has not seen any. The health unit that borders Ottawa, Southeast Health, has had 79 cases, including 10 new confirmations in the past week. This includes Kingston and Belleville, as well as numerous smaller communities and rural areas. If individuals are looking for more information on that, you can go to Central Health Education Ontario, and they publish stuff pretty much every week on what's happening here. So Public Health Ontario is a good place to go if you're looking for more information. And again, can't stress enough, herd immunity and vaccinations are important.
Yeah. Take care out there. And part of the reason why it slows down, because the candidates for getting measles are being used up. You know what I mean? Like,
yep.
So that's part of the reason why it slows down, because candidates for acquiring the disease are limited. And like you described, in a group of people who believe in not being immunized. The other question, I know we have no time, but I wanted to ask you while you were talking. I was thinking about the 5% that were vaccinated. How does the measles affect them? Is there an advantage to not, to having been vaccinated? Is their experience not as hard as it is for those that are not vaccinated?
Well, those who typically only get 2 and don't necessarily get a booster are slightly more likely to contract it. But again, the vaccination reduces the harmful effects. That's primarily, well, that's one of the major secondary functions after, of course, making sure that you don't get it at all. Over time, protection can wane. But, this is one of those things where you need to make sure that you're on top of it. 2 doses of the measles, mumps, and rubella, or MMR vaccine, offer almost 100% effectiveness in the long term. Those of us who were born after 1970 haven't really encountered measles because, we've been vaccinated. Now, there are a small percentage of people in that scenario will have some decrease in immunity, but a lot of the times it will happen when your system gets overwhelmed. So if you're one adult and you're in with 20 kids that have measles, chances are you're going to get it, even if you have had both shots. But if you can reduce your exposure to affected and infected individuals, odds of not getting it are obviously that much better.
Yeah, the exposure for me, what's important is, as a person who believes vaccines have a place in our society, I want to know, if it doesn't stop you being impacted by it or having measles, does it at least minimize the damage it can do?
And the answer to that is yes.
Am I looking for reasons to promote vaccines? I guess I am. That's just, but more or less, it's about finding out the facts. Just because it doesn't 100% eliminate opportunity that you have measles doesn't mean that it's a bad thing that you have the vaccine or that it doesn't work. That kind of thing. It's for me, it's the same as seatbelts, kind of. I'll put it this way. Everybody wears a seatbelt. Some people do die in car accidents. Yeah, they were wearing a seatbelt, but they die in a car accident. But when you look deeper, it isn't because they were wearing a seatbelt. So thanks for doing this, Aaron. Really appreciate it. And praying for those children that have measles. I hope it doesn't have any long-term effects on them. I hope they recover real quick. It's one spot that I don't like. I don't like seeing children suffer. They don't deserve it, but it is what it is. Thanks for doing this, buddy. Much appreciated. Thank you for watching as well. All of you here on YouTube, you can watch and follow us. Candid Frank Stanisci, 10:30 on YouTube. Thanks for watching. Montreal, Washington's up next, folks.